Your brain pop this week is going to talk about this idea that there's a controversy or an argument amongst historians about what was the Civil War fought about. Was it states' rights or was it slavery? Well, lucky for us, we have these primary source documents. Primary document in history means that is from the actual time period. These are not someone's opinion or someone's telling of the story. These are documents that came from the period in question. So luckily the states told us why they left in these articles of secession or declaration of causes. So remember I talked to you guys about the Daughters of the Confederacy. They went around after the Civil War and they tried to clean up the history. They wanted to make the South look better, because if it was fought over slavery, it looks kind of bad for the South if they were fighting for slavery and the North was fighting against slavery. It's kind of like when an ex tries to go around and tell a different version of the story and say there's all these other things involved. No, it's because you cheated. That's why it ended. It's not because of all these other things. That's why we broke up. You cheated on me. So that's kind of what the Daughters of the Confederacy did. But if you remember, the Missouri Compromise was about Missouri being a slave state, Maine coming in as free. They were compromising because the South didn't want to lose the balance of power. When the Mexican-American War was won by the United States, new states were coming in, and so they were going to decide for themselves to be free or slave, popular sovereignty. Many of the Southerners knew, they're going to vote to be free, so in return they got a Fugitive Slave Act in which the North was legally obligated or forced to catch fugitive slaves escaping from the South and send them back, or escape from the South in the North and send them back to the South into slavery. And a lot of Northerners, they didn't like slavery, so they just ignored that idea, which angered the South. Then we get the Kansas-Nebraska Act. We wanted new states to expand or make the transcontinental railroad longer. So we did that popular sovereignty idea again. What happened? One side accused the other of cheating. And that turned into a big fight, and it was actually bloodshed. You had slave rebellions, Nat Turner. You had John Brown, who tried to raid Harper's Ferry, take over the arsenal, and stage slave revolts. Before he died, he said that the sin of slavery would only be purged or taken away by blood, and he was right, and that was the Civil War. So when we talk about this controversy then, why is it a controversy? Well, again, the Daughters of the Confederacy, they said so. But like I said, we have these documents, and the South tells us why pretty explicitly, or pretty much in detail, about why they left. Was it because of tariffs? Well, luckily for us, we have computers, and they can scan the whole document for words. So let me type in the word tariff. Hey, look, it doesn't come up once. None of those states even mention the word tariff. What about the phrase states' rights? Phrase don't come up, not once. But if I put in the word what? Slave? Oops. 83 times slave comes up. Alright, so it says cause of complaint against our non-slave holding Confederate States with reference to the subject of what? African slavery. It says it right there. And look at that highlighted in yellow. It's just, it comes up a lot. As you can see, it wasn't a small issue. And I think this, out of all of the statements, is pretty much the most telling. It says, the prohibition, that's the banning, we're going to prohibit, banning of slavery in the territories is the cardinal principle of this organization. So cardinal principle, that means the main reason of this organization, what? The Confederacy. So not being able to have slaves is the main reason we're having the Confederacy. That's what that says right there. It's pretty plain, black and white. This isn't my opinion. This is what the primary document says. This is what the states said why they left the Union. So I'll show you another one from Mississippi. It says our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. And they start talking about how if you don't have slavery, the whole economy is going to collapse. It'll be terrible for the whole world. South Carolina, they were the first ones, and they talk about slavery. Not quite as much, but as you see, it definitely comes up quite a bit. And I wanted to show you our state, Texas. They say something pretty provocative. If I can find it here. It says, we hold as undeniable truths that the government of the various states and of the Confederacy itself were established exclusively or only for the white race, for themselves and their posterity, which means their future, and that the African race had no agency, it had no part of, it didn't have anything to do with this establishment. So they had nothing to do with it. So they were rightfully, so it was correct, they were held and regarded as inferior, dependent, and in that condition only could their existence in this country be rendered beneficial or tolerable. So we couldn't even tolerate their existence unless they were slaves, is what they're saying. So it says all white men are and of right ought to be entitled to equal and civil political rights. That the servitude of the African race, the slavery of the African race is existing in these states is mutually beneficial to both bond and free, and is abundantly authorized and justified by experience of mankind and revealed by the Almighty Creator. So what they're saying is, it's good for the slaves, it's good for the white people, God wants it, God's on our side, we should have slavery. And so the North is going against the good of both. And then we got Virginia, and they talk about that too. But there you have it. It's there for you to read. Not my opinion. They told us why they left. Remember any of this talk about tariffs and states' rights? States' rights to do what? States' rights to do what? What were they fighting for the right to do? Drink water out of a water fountain? That was Mr. Larios' example when we learned about the Constitution. Was that what they were fighting for? The right to do that? What were they fighting for? What right? What states' rights? You hear that stuff? It's nonsense. So, and it's not my opinion. Again, these are primary source documents. The states told us why.